Welcome to Truth or Fiction Classified. I'm your host, Justus Knight, and on this broadcast, we cover today's headlines that beg the question, are they truth, are they fiction, or will the answers simply remain classified? Hello, my friends, it's Justus Knight. Thank you again for tuning in. I'm going to ask you to sit back and hold on, because for me to broadcast today's information, I needed and I felt it only just to you to assure I went into as much detail as possible to fully understand why I am claiming that this hotbed area is one of the three most likely points for the next war to begin. This one terrifies me because as you dig into it, it's South China Sea is what we're going to be talking about. You'll see a map up on your screen here, and I'm not going to jump into it quite yet, but you can see that there's a lot of overlapping regions. All these lines represents the interest of the Philippines, mainland China, Taiwan, Brunei, Malaysia, just to name a few. And if you add in just a sprinkling of U.S. warships floating in and the other warships cutting us off and us throwing our bombers over the top of it, because this is technically supposed to be what they would consider, neutral territory, of which China says it will never be neutral. We will control the South China Sea. If you understand the history here, it paints a rather bleak picture. And the article that triggered this off, and you always start with your first article, I provide references because you're going to need to dive into some of this information in much greater depth, even though I'm going to go fairly deep today because we need to fully understand what's going on and why it keeps making headlines over and over. So Fox News publishes this title: China's Xi Jinping tells military advisors overseeing South China Sea to prepare for fighting a war. Great article, right? You always got to go back to the original article, or at least one of the originating articles from South China Morning Post. Here it is. 2 days prior to the Fox one. Preparing for war, Xi Jinping tells military region that monitors South China Sea, Taiwan, China must take all complex situations into consideration and make emergency plans accordingly. Xi says on visit to Southern Theater Command. Military region has had to bear a heavy military responsibility in recent years, he says. And what is he? Okay, great. Get ready for war. All your staged governmental pictures, which he controls every single one that comes out. So you can only believe so much of what you read. But in this case, there's hard evidence because, as the dialogue says right here, the dialogue's the best way to ease U.S.-Chinese tensions. This one may not ease because we're not giving in, and they're not giving in. We're going to go as to why, because I think to understand this entire issue, we got to understand the history of the South China Sea and Spratly Island, to be more specific. Going back to this map, and I love references. I love interactive references. I love things illustrated because I believe for me, and hopefully for you, it paints the picture of what's happening. And if you look at all these intersecting lines, you'll quickly understand why this is so contested. Of course, South China, boom, just putting their stamp over the entire region saying, we'll control everything. Now, I'm going to show you what they're doing to control it in just a little while, and we may be throwing a little bit of gas on the fire, but nonetheless, we have to, because if we give away this zone, and we're not even going to cover the oil reserves that are spotted around the southern portion of this map, huge oil reserves that could be the real reason behind a lot of this installations that is happening from China. But this is a great map because mainland China, which if you click on the tab, and again, if you follow my references, you can do this on your own and take a lot more time and read the headings. You'll see that this dotted red line and all the little red dots in are everything that China currently, controls. And then we're going to go to Vietnam. And when you click on Vietnam, it shows their region of what they believe they control. And guess what? See those little flashing yellow dots where it's going to go back into it real quick here? So watch, there's your flashing yellow dots. That's what they believe they control, right on top of China's. Then we're going to go to the Philippines. Philippines, a much smaller region, not quite as many islands. You saw the blue dots flash. We can go Brunei. You're going to see, again, a smaller southern region. Just one island really flashes up. Malaysia, slightly bigger imprint, but again, very little in the islands, maybe 5 or 6. And then we hit Taiwan. Now, Taiwan, you saw one island flash. I'm going to back out, and I'm going to come back into Taiwan because you saw one island flash right here. And that's going to be all you see. Well, Taiwan just happens to be what I believe could trigger this war. And why do I say that? Well, before we go further, again, I get very excited about this topic because it's excited in a way that there is so much information to help us understand what's happening. Sometimes when we get in that side of the globe, it's very tough to get a good understanding of what's happening. Well, here, there's so much interest in the region that you're getting satellite footage because China's contended that we're doing nothing out there. We're not building any installations. I don't know what you're talking about with the Spratly Islands, which we're going to kind of run through here very quickly. We're not reinforcing any of the islands. Well, come on, guys. The military footage, the surveillance footage, and here you're going to see this is way back in November of 2017. This published in March of this year. And I'm just going to click on this one in high resolution, and we're going to back out and go look at the rest. If this isn't a developed island, this is the best job of editing a picture that I've ever seen. Folks, this is a naval air station. Developed on a portion of the Spratly Islands, Subi Reef to be most specific, with port entrances, naval bases, but we're not developing anything. But, Justice, maybe you misunderstood that picture. Maybe you missed it. Well, again, there's another map of the contested regions, this is an excellent map, actually. But we're going to go back in. That's a picture, again, of here's Mischief Reef, another port entrance. A deep water channel. Now, they don't tell you what that means, but on a deep water channel, that's so submarines, they're basically letting you know in so many ways, this is the way submarines can come in and out. It's a deep water reef, deep enough to house a sub. The lighthouse beacons are there to assure everybody, guide them through the channel. If it's a military ship or sub, it's of no consequences. It's a military installation with the radar off to the right. This is the main part of Mischief Reef that everybody's been watching. Here's another portion of Mischief Reef. You'll see the refilling stations, the communications antennas, the military barracks, the headquarters. There's a ship, but we're not developing anything there. This one's crazy. And then you go back to Subi Reef, you'll see the airstrips once again. You'll see the hangars, you'll see the helicopter landing marks. We can keep going down in these pictures. Folks, I know you understand the picture. You can see that when China says that nothing's happening there, as it states in this quote, I love this, Adrian Zevenberger. This is from European Space Imaging, the company or outfit responsible for providing this imagery, states the power of the 30-centimeter resolution is undeniable for the defense and intelligence sector. In these images of the Spratly Islands, we have been able to verify several identifying factors that could prove critical to a military operation without the risk of detection or on-ground personnel. So, yeah, you got them. Great job on the images. So that proves that they are already militarizing something they said they're not militarizing. But why? What is the issue? Well, remember when we mentioned Taiwan? U.S. $330 million arms sale to Taiwan will go ahead, says U.S. Congress. The sale, mainly of aircraft parts, will be the second military deal for Taipei in less than 18 months under the Trump administration. So why is this so relevant? Well, our Congress is supporting it. And this is upsetting Beijing to no hilt. Because why? Because they consider Taiwan a renegade province. You'll see in this article, China strongly opposes any U.S. arms sale and official contract with Taiwan, which Beijing regards as a wayward province, to be unified with the mainland by force if necessary. The U.S. has no formal diplomatic relations with the self-ruled island, but maintains informal ties and is its sole arms supplier. So, layman's terms, you're ours. U.S.'s terms, they're not yours. And we're going to reinforce them. That's not making Beijing happy. And here's the president of Taiwan and her speech that she gave recently.
不但伤害了两岸关系，更严重的挑战了台海的和平稳定的现状。
So we're going to start it there, the Taiwan Strait. And our relationships are strained. And the president of that country calling directly to China and saying, you are straining the relationship. Us going ahead and offering $330 million in arms. Is that enough to cause a little bit of the tension? Well, there's more. Because the U.S. and all the tariffs that Trump is throwing down on China. All warning flags that something's brewing. But then you get General Mad Dog Mattis, and here he comes, and what's he got to say? We will not be intimidated, China. Mattis doubles down on U.S. vow to counter China's attempt to dominate the South China Sea. Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis met with his Chinese counterpart Thursday to discuss a host of tense issues and walked out basically saying, we're not going to come to a resolution on this right now. This is going to remain a point of contention. I love some of the quotes. China wants nothing less than to push the United States of America from the Western Pacific and attempt to prevent us from coming to the aid of our allies. Pence explained. This was Pence, I'm sorry. He called attention to the recent showdown in the South China Sea as evidence of China's aggression. A Chinese naval vessel came within 45, you remember the news on this, within 45 yards of the USS Decatur as it conducted freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea, forcing our ship to quickly maneuver to avoid collision. This is unsafe and unprofessional. So Mattis came to the aid and basically seconded everything he said. I think that all of us joining hands together, ASEAN allies and partners, and we affirm, as we do, so that no single nation can rewrite the international rule to the road and expect all nations, large and small, to respect those rules. That's what Mattis said during a meeting with his Japanese and South Korean counterparts, according to The Hill, who published that. So Mattis backs up everything that Pence had said, ratcheting up the rhetoric even more. So my friends, this is just a few of the overriding indicators of what's coming. And then you have articles like this. Within the last week, China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran set for electronic pulse attacks on U.S. This is EMP attacks to shut us down. And it would only take a few nuclear missiles basically shot up in the air to go off and cripple our satellites. This is a story for a different day because this is an entirely different conflict of how we may be behind or may not be behind because we're never going to release this information. This came out of a declassified article that basically said that North Korea, Russia, and China have already launched satellites that are there to monitor a short-term nuclear attack, which would raise the suspicion and should raise the threat level of obviously countries that we continue to watch. So something new, something not new, but EMP to me is one of the four most military technologies and weapons that we have to watch out for, because this, they say, could happen from a man-made or natural source, because a sunburst or whatever you want to call it can cause such an EMP into the earth that it could technically cripple our satellites, and there's nothing we can do to stop that. This covers that potential and also the man-made potential, which reels us back to this conflict and the whole picture region here of Taiwan, Vietnam, Malaysia, China, the U.S. Yeah, Russia has interest in there too, but they're not really covering it right now. We're kind of staying on the outskirts of it because there's enough here. There's enough happening with the relationships of Taiwan and the United States. There's enough with the oil reserves to the south. There's enough with Chinese dominance. They will control this entire strait. And any chance to militarize Taiwan against China? If we're selling them arms, you really think we're going to tell everybody everything we're selling to Taiwan? Or is it potential that we have a partner that's within striking distance of mainland China? And if you were the Chinese President Xi Jinping, would you not try to reinforce against that and stop these interests from floating into a region so close to your country in a contested body of water that has oil interest, that has defensive islands, that you've now put radar in, so any way into that access, into that ocean into that body of water, out of the ocean into that body of water, up into the Taiwan Strait, are completely monitored. Nothing will get past these radars. Do you start to understand and put the picture together as why this is such a hotbed area? It's at a flashpoint that at any moment can go off because Mattis is saying we ain't going to back down. We're going to keep sending our warships. We're going to keep sending our bombers over. And please don't contest us. But they did. They put their warship right in front of ours. So much so that we had to make a hard turn to get out of the way. Now, a lot of that obviously is positioning, posturing, peacocking, whatever you want to call it. But my friends, when you have an area that contested, when you have, by the way, here's your final proof. I'm not going to zoom in on this. I'm going to leave it in my links, but just look at these are areas, and each color, the red is occupied by China. And the structures you'll see are military bases, sea forts, garrisons, outpost structures, and each country that has them within that region. And there's China. There's Vietnam. There's Taiwan and the Taiwan Strait, which is in that point of contention we just talked about from the statement you heard from the Taiwanese president. This is the picture that's being painted, and it's rather bleak. There is so much interest, and whenever in history we've seen this much overlapping interest in an area, we all know what happens. So I wanted to do my part to educate and help educate you, although many of you know so much of this already. I hope these pieces really folded the bigger picture together for you to see why we have to be concerned about this region, why Trump and his administration, between the tariffs, between selling arms, between keeping the military on alert, now Xi Jinping putting his military alert saying prepare for war. Folks, this is a powder keg that is waiting to go off. I hope it never does. I hope and pray it never does. But so that you can stay in touch as these articles continue to post, I wanted to spend a lot of time on this today, walk you through the details. I certainly hoped it helped. If you can share it so that others can have their eyes open to what's happening, be informed and be advised, because the more intelligent we become on these issues, the more we can weaponize ourselves against good information and bad information. Because, my friends, when you provide references and links, this is where the good information is. When you watch your network news, you get references of where they got the information? Not necessarily, but here you do. And that's why the whole fake news moniker that you hear thrown around like a weapon is ridiculous, because what we work to provide you is your own information so you can dive in and make your own assessment. It's why I ultimately called this segment Truth or Fiction Classified, because I wanted you to determine if it's truth or fiction. I'll give you my opinion. This one is 1,000,000% truth. The images, the rhetoric, the articles, the tariffs, the militarization, the arms sales, the statements directly from the presidents and the leaders of both countries is telling you this is an area that we have to be concerned about. I hope this information helped paint that picture for you. I want to thank you each for tuning in. If you can support me via PayPal or Patreon, I can't tell you how much that helps. If you can make sure you spread the word, I'm continuing to build this subscriber base, a newer station. It's grown amazingly because of each of you, and I can't thank you enough for that. Once again, my name is Justus Knight. This is Truth or Fiction Classified. And most importantly, and I'll never forget, Godspeed and God bless to each of you. Thank you so much for tuning in. I can't wait to see you next time.